Hi, this is Gary with MacMost Now. Today's episode, let's talk about the physical switches on iOS devices. So since the release of the first iPhone, each iOS device has featured no less than 4 switches around the edges. Let's take a look at what each one can do. Some of them might be able to perform functions you didn't even know about. So first, let's start with the home button. That's the bottom of the screen for every iOS device. So the most basic thing the home button does is it takes you home. If you're inside of an app, for instance, you press the home button and it takes you back to the home screen. If you're on another screen of the home screen, press the home button and it takes you all the way back to the beginning. If you double press the button, it will actually show you the recents list at the bottom, and you can flip through that and also get to various extra controls if you go all the way to the left. And of course, if you press and hold the home button, you get Siri. In addition, you've got a triple press. You can go into your settings under General and then go to Accessibility, and you see at the bottom there's triple click Home, and you could set it to activate some of the accessibility features like VoiceOver or Resume, Invert Colors, or Assistive Touch. So if you need one of those, then you can activate it easily with a triple press of the home button. So we're not quite done with the home button yet, but for now let's go to the top where we have what's called the sleep wake button. So if you press the sleep wake button while your iPad is on and showing something, either an app or right here on the home screen, it goes to sleep. Now if you are already asleep, it should wake up and give you the lock screen. There we go. You can see that it's giving me the lock screen and now I can unlock it. Now the home button and the sleep wake button can work in tandem to give you a screenshot. So you can get to anything you want. Say you're inside of an app and you want to take a screenshot of what's there. Press both buttons at the same time and you get a photo taking sound. Now when I go to my Photos app, I can see that under Camera Roll I have a screenshot of what happened when I was pressing those two buttons. So you can do this to capture something going on, or if you've created something in an app and you want to kind of take a shot of it to remember it, you can do it. So next we have the volume buttons that are on the side. Now the volume buttons here on the iPad mini are actually two separate buttons, but on a lot of iPads and other iOS devices they are kind of a toggle with one button at the top, one button at the bottom. So you can see here as I raise and lower the volume, I'll get an indicator on the screen showing me the volume level. In some apps, like if you're in the music app, it won't show you that. It'll just change the volume there in the upper right hand corner. And then it's also kind of tricky because there's different volume settings. For instance, there's different volume settings for when you have your headphones plugged in as for when you're using speakers. So you can plug in your headphones, adjust the volume, then take the headphones out and find that the volume's back to the level it was before because there's a different volume setting for using speakers and a different one for using headphones. So here's something you may not know about the volume controls. They have a secondary function, and that's when you launch the camera app on an iPad or an iPhone or iPod Touch, you can use these volume buttons to take a picture. So that means that you can actually use them kind of as a shutter control instead of trying to clumsily find the button on the screen. Makes it a lot easier on the iPad mini here, and it's definitely a better experience when you're taking pictures with the iPhone. So now let's talk about the side switch. Here on the iPad it is just by the volume control on the right. On the iPhone it's on the left, so it depends on the device you've got. But it's the one little switch that you can go into an on-off mode. And by default this is the mute button, but it doesn't have to be. If you go into your settings and then you go into General, you can see that there is a setting there for Use Side Switch. And this Use Side Switch to setting you can set to lock, rotation, or mute. Now by default it's mute. I don't find it as useful because the volume control is right there. It's very easy to hit that down volume and quickly mute what's going on. Lock rotation is much more useful, especially on an iPad where you might be reading in different orientations, like for instance reclining or lying down, and you don't want it to switch orientation. Now whichever one you choose, the opposite one will be available if you double press the home button. Go over to the left and you can see there I've got a mute button at the bottom left. If I were to change this so the side switch is mute, then you could see that now that's the lock orientation button. So you always have availability of the opposite function just by double pressing the home button and going over to the left. But I like to keep this one at lock rotation. I find it more useful. So is that it for physical switches? Well, not exactly, because your iPad also has an accelerometer in it. And with that you can do gestures, of course, you know, in games and everything, and how you orient the iPad and use it. But you can also use it for some basic functions you might not know about. For instance, shake to undo. So here I am in Notes, and I'm going to change some text here, and then I want to undo it. I'm going to undo it by simply shaking my iPad, and you can see a little thing comes up, undo typing. And I can undo all the work that I just did apparently. But it work differently on different apps depending upon if they use this for an undo function. And some apps use shake for other completely different things. Now if you have an iPad you may also use the smart cover. And the smart cover is kind of a physical switch in and of itself. You attach it there, and then when you close the smart cover it turns off your iPad. And you can change this setting pretty easily. If you go into the general category under settings, there's the iPad cover lock unlock feature. So if that's kind of getting in the way a lot, you can simply turn off that physical switch. So here's a look at some of the physical switches you can find on iOS devices and different things they can do. Hope you found this useful. Till next time, this is Gary with MacMost Now. Want more video tutorials? Just go to MacMost.com, click on the videos link at the top of the page, and then you can view all of the hundreds of MacMost videos by category.